comes up from, how do you see the economic distribution?
You mean the C Street Ferry?
Yeah.
Our competitor, yeah. Well, again, everything is different. Every market is different. The markets are very local, especially in the East River, where people generally walk right to the waterfront. In New Jersey, they can either walk to the waterfront because we serve a local market like we do in the East River, but we also serve a regional market through intermodal connections with bus, light rail, heavy rail at Hoboken and Park Ride. So, again, the Hudson River Ferry's economics are different. It's a higher volume model. The actual operating margins, I can't get into them route by route, but they all vary. And the market characteristics of each route vary somewhat. But generally, we charge a premium. And we charge a premium over mass transit, public mass transit, because we have to. We have to make money. And the unique thing about ferry transportation is that it's the only form of mass transit people are willing to pay more for, even if it takes longer. And think about that. Would you pay more to take a bus if it took longer, or a subway train? No, you wouldn't. You take a ferry, and you'll pay more, even if it takes longer. But the good thing is it generally doesn't take longer, so you're saving time. So the value premium is very significant, and communicating that to the marketplace is something that we have to do on an ongoing basis. But my experience is once you induce trial in someone, and again, there's a demographic cutoff. It's not affordable by everybody. But for those who can afford it, even occasionally, if you induce trial, they generally will always remember it, and they'll always want to take it if they have the means to do so.
Unlike the subway system, certainly, there's a perception that weather has, it's a favorable, they have a beautiful sunny day, people want to take ferry, those are depending on it for regular communication. Do you find that statistically to be true, that the weather, the weather impact?
Yes, but it's not as significant as some might think. I mean, weather affects ferries less than other forms of transportation. Snow doesn't affect us at all. It affects the upland connections. And the boats will run through a blizzard, but nobody will be able to get to the terminals. The only thing that really slows the ferries down is heavy ice and occasional fog. And we may have fog 2 or 3 times a year. We have radars to operate around that. Heavy ice is a problem, and we've only had problems maybe 3 or 4 out of the last 15 winters. But when it's bad, it's very bad, but we've never been shut down by ice.
I think the question really is whether people make the conscious decision in rougher weather not to take the ferry because possibly rough seas, rough exchange from the boat to the upland transportation.
Well, New York Harbor is a very protected waterway, and you never really see significant chop in the harbor. You may get a couple foot of swells every once in a while, but that's, and very, very sensitive stomachs might feel a little queasy on a 10-minute ride, but it's really not an issue. The longer distant ferries, yes. Then when, from Belford, for example, you're out in the harbor, you're out, below the Narrows, and you can get some swells in from the ocean, but generally that's not an issue. I mean, if it's very inclement, and there's a lot of rain, blowing wind and rain, yeah, that deters everyone from traveling. So the longer the walk to a sheltered terminal, yes, that can deter people. But generally, we don't see too much drop-off.
I guess getting back to the employment issue, and Arthur, this will be the last one for you for a bit, at least, so we get Michael and Eric, as he would get something, cue them backing on it. But employment, aside from the retail and the other activity that comes along the waterfront, there's also the employment factor that say the MTA, when they say they're going to buy rail cars, and maybe they build a Kawasaki, to the degree that where is the work done for for your boats, whether it be Europe or for the industry generally? I mean, the number of sort of maritime support jobs within the harbor.
Well, that's a good point. We have our own maintenance staff. We have to maintain all our own vessels. We couldn't subcontract that out. The question of where to do that is one that we're trying to work on with our public sector partners, because the working waterfront is basically gone. And we need the infrastructure to maintain and store our vessels and our buses. We're working on that. We think we'll come up with an answer soon. But we're the largest marine operator in the harbor, and there still is a maritime culture in the harbor, thankfully. And so there's a steady flow of maritime professionals that we can avail ourselves of. But getting good mechanics is a difficult task, because skilled mechanics are, they're a legacy, and there are not very many young, bright, 20 or 30 somethings who want to turn a wrench. So that's and so immigrant labor tends to fill that.
No, certainly, I'll put a plug in. We have, of course, the shipyards for repair, and I think new buildings, realistically, in this area is not, something that's happened since I think they closed Beth Yard. Any significant, I could be corrected, but maybe on some small scales. But I think most of the new buildings are done down south nowadays. But for repair yards, and then also for some of the skilled labor, depending on what you're doing with the SUNY Maritime, with King Point 2, we have maritime academies, which sort of fall off a lot of people's radar screen, but still are, play a part of the broader diversification of the economy locally. On the retail, Mike, Eric, how do you see it going forward? And, we have these economic swings, but currently, how do you see the outlook? We hear Jeff talking about building, doing some more building. What's sort of in your prospects? If you look forward, optimistically, what do you see?
Well, we're planning on opening a second retail location closer to the ferry docks down in Dumbo. We're looking at other locations for retail. In Dumbo, real estate development is sort of at a peak frenzy now. I believe there are about between 600 and 700 new units coming into market in the next 2 years. So we think it's great. And when you add the residential to the tourist traffic that's coming into Brooklyn at a much higher rate than ever before, the future is really bright for us.
Eric, for yourself, any new guys?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, we actually have been actively seeking a second location. It's probably going to be on the waterfront. And since I got an invitation from Jeff, maybe we'll speak after the conference. But yeah, I mean, we've got our figures.
I'm ready to negotiate right now.
We've Greenpoint is a couple of years behind Williamsburg as far as development is concerned, but there are approved plans for waterfront development in Greenpoint, so I mean it's only going to make our successful business a little bit more successful, and we're certainly looking to branch out, and given the success that we've had in Greenpoint on the waterfront, we'd like to stay in Brooklyn, and we'd like to stay on the waterfront. So I mean we've been actively looking for places.
Shame on me for not knowing, but does Greenpoint have as far as a formal bid structure, business improvement district, is that, and Jeff, you may want to comment on the pros and cons of those, and some of these areas where we have new ferry, where the ferry service is being started up to complement that. Is that, what's the feeling on the panel on that one?
I'll answer it because I like to get political. I always believed that the real estate taxes that we pay were for cleanup and security and all of those services that government is supposed to provide. I get offended when you have to pay an additional tax on top of it to pay a bid to do what you're already paying the government to do. I'm not against having a spokesperson. Marty Markowitz, our borough president, is one of the greatest advocates for the borough ever. And if there's an organization to promote the community in the borough, that's a wonderful thing. But I think taxation, double taxation, is not my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on that as well. Bids, Greenpoint does not have a bid, and bids are typically for extremely distressed neighborhoods. They do extremely well, and very established neighborhoods, like 34th Street bid in Manhattan. But like Jeff said, the general feeling of the property owners is, I'm already paying my taxes. Greenpoint, Williamsburg, I mean, we've been, relatively isolated from the, the real estate market crash. So, I mean, the general feeling of property owners is, I'm getting my rent, my property value is going up. Why do I need to pay extra money for a bid? We do have a business alliance. There's, Jeff could probably tell you, there's more grassroots organizations in Greenpoint and Williamsburg, sort of watchdog organizations and so on and so forth. So, I think we'll be okay without the bid.
It's interesting as a side note, if we have a dredging panel, we could talk about that. The tens of hundreds of billions of dollars have been paid in by the maritime industry to the harbor maintenance tax. That unfortunately, there's none of that. It all gets swept into the general fund. And for those who maybe it's inside ball, but Empire State Development or EDC, when we do transactional roles with developers, you know, there's a fee that EDC or ESCC takes out, and developers are always saying, well, that fee's large, we're paying government for this, and, you know, don't we pay taxes? And even when we did get some of that funding into Empire State Development, in fact, most of the time, if we had a little surplus to the end of the year, the Division of Budget, you know, all the gnomes of Zurich moved to Albany into someplace downtown, and they come in, they sweep your account if you're an agency. So yeah, double taxation, for better or for worse, seems to be we're going to be stuck with in a lot of ways, Jeff. I hate to tell you. Well, there's one particular question came up here, and there are a couple that sort of get into not really ferry related, more waterfront development. You know, what can historic ships be utilized for economic as an engine for economic development? Other things are more economic development. What activity, when you have a ferry in a marine environment, certainly, you know, if you have, you know, if you look, say, down in, anybody's been to Cape Town, South Africa, you know, or in a number of places where you have historic vessels, you have a ferry terminal, anything that helps give critical mass and draw people. I think a lot of historic vessels at different places, sometimes they catch on. I know you look at South Street Seaport Museum and the whole South Street development, that's had a checkered history, you know, that it really has not taken off historically the way people wanted. So, you know, this panel is not really into, you know, how to make, how to do best kind of waterfront development and what's the role of historic vessels, but those kind of issues come into, obviously, to, you know, the economic development officials and trying to pull that together to say, okay, what's the right mix on the waterfront? How do we zone it? What kind of incentives do we give either, you know, to the ferry operators, to the real estate developers? You know, what kind of breaks go to for the retail people coming in, or you know, commercial developers, commercial tenants who will move into a certain neighborhood, are there different breaks? And so that's sort of the art of economic development. I know there's some people from the EDC, you know, out and about, so I'm sure for those who, I can point you out to them for those who have questions along those lines. I think there were, if anybody has any questions, I think I have all the questions in. I guess we have about 5 minutes left, but I think we can all figure what to do with that if, you know, if there's nothing more. Certainly I don't have it, and you could go on for hours about some of the minutiae of it, but I think that sort of gives a broad spectrum. Maybe just, oh, sorry.
Arthur, where are your boats manufactured?
Well, it varies because of the, some of you probably know this, but the oldest piece of trade regulation in the country, which goes back to 1798, the Jones Act, requires that vessels in domestic service be built in the United States, which actually limits our choice of a vessel. We can't purchase boats from Europe or from the Far East. They have to be built in America, so that actually limits our choices and drives up the price. We built our first generation of vessels in the Gulf Coast, in Mississippi, Louisiana. Then we used a shipbuilder in Alaska for our high-speed catamaran ferries. And now actually we are starting to build vessels in our home state of New Jersey, in southern New Jersey. We found an excellent yard south of Atlantic City, and it's a winning combination to build vessels in New Jersey for New Jersey commuters, so we're fortunate.
Good. Yeah, please. We'll stand up.
Bike share. I'm talking about cheap mobile boat. How do you see that integrating in with the East River or the Hudson for ferry service?
I'm not exactly sure I understand your question. Cheap intermodal?
Well, no. New York City is launching 10,000 bike share. Maybe you want to go for 50,000.
Maybe I could step out. Familiar with Alta, the proposal that the city did, and it's about where you rent the bikes by the hour.
The bike share.
Yeah, and the question is, I guess the way to tie the question together is, are there bike share terminals? Because somebody is not going to want to go out necessarily to New Jersey the way the cost structure is.
Can you take a ferry like from New Jersey and get off of 34th Street or wherever, and then hop on bike share?
Yes.
That's integrated.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we work very closely with the DOT, and I know there's a bike share station planned for the 39th Street terminal on the west side. So yes, you could take a ferry and then rent a bike. Or you could, if you rent it for a whole day, you can take it to New Jersey and back.
Actually, I think they have year-long passes as well for the bikes.
Yes, you can purchase a year-long pass. You can rent by the day, by the week, I think by the year if you want.
I understand that the way it's geared now from Alta, though, that the longer the period of time, it goes up significantly the per hour charge to try to discourage long haul use.
Right, they want you to commit to a longer term in their prices. Yeah, I mean, intermodality includes bikes now,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Sorry,
Just a point of reference on, sorry, guy from Rockville. One of these might realize, express buses, get a subsidy of almost $12 a day on it. I mean, one run a day. If you put in ferry service at the South Shore of Staten Island, and you can free up more than 2/3 of those buses to have buses for other parts of the city.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Queens too.
got that. I think for those in here, John was raised the issue about how much subsidy of public transit. I touched on briefly about highways, you know, how much you get to each car, so that each person driving a car gets supported. He gave a specific example of express buses where apparently it's up to $12 per head of subsidy.
Each way.
And if you could do that for each ride, if you could do that for a ferry, that gets into public policy issues with transportation. I would say something, and you know, for a number of us, that we are interested is to look to make some of the public subsidies mode neutral. I know talking to past chairman of the MTA, they said, "Oh, ferry, it's so minor. You know, we got to move millions and millions of people." And you know, say, "Well, yeah, but if you could take even a couple % off, and if you could sit for that money, or even save it, do it for $6 instead of $12, you know." And usually they'll come back and say, "Well, we have to do the express bus anyway, so it would be, you know, we're going to be undermining our." But I think if you do it targeted, I would have to think, keep pushing. If you look at how bike share has changed things, you know, the environment is changing. Certainly, if you start capturing the environmental costs and the carbon footprint, and the mayor and his plan is, you know, about reducing dramatically reducing the carbon footprint in New York, then you have to be looking at cutting, you know, diesel and a lot of those other kind of issues that favor, you know, modes of
Well,
transportation.
we're not only making the one run, we drive one back to Washington, Madison, every 4 hours to drive back again. So it's a double fuel cost on top of that.
Right. I guess in closing, we can always have, you know, feel free at the panel. Arthur, any closing comment?
Well, I wanted to show one last slide, which is, I think, the future.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just one last one. This may be worth your while someday.
It's not like the guy saying last call, we got this one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I hate this thing. I think this is to address your point about buses and the turning of buses and the extra cost of running buses across the river. This is just one slide, but it's really, to me, it's the future of mass transit in the New York Harbor. And it has to do with intermodality. Intermodality is between ferries, bus, light rail, parking, bicycles, as I said before. I just need to find the right album. So there's only one slide in the album, so that's the good news. But, yeah, there it is. This is the intermodal connections. Just that one slide, you can blow it up. That's, to me, the future. That's taken from the second floor balcony of the Weehawken terminal that I showed you before. There's one of our buses parked in front of the garage that's under construction. You see a light rail bridge across Port Imperial Boulevard in Weehawken connecting to the Hudson Bergen light rail. Consider that to be the western portal of a new bridge across the river. And I think New York City recognizes, New Jersey Transit recognizes that the only answer to the mass transit problem across the Hudson River is to offload as many buses as possible at New York waterway terminals on the Hudson County waterfront and get people across the river without having to put the buses through the Lincoln and Holland tunnels. It's the only answer. We're not going to be building more bridges or tunnels across or under the river. This intermodality and the substantial investment in intermodality that the state of New Jersey has made and will continue to make is really the answer to the $13 billion rail tunnel that Governor Christie, I think quite properly, put an end to a couple of years ago.
Well, Arthur, before we go, because it is now, I would say we'll keep that in mind for a future panel.
Right. No politics. I'm independent. I is for infrastructure.
Good. Michael, yourself? Any closing observations?
All good.
All right. Jeff?
Come to Williamsburg. We only have 35 apartments left, and you have to wait a long time.
All right, Eric, yourself?
It's hard to top that one.
All right, now the last thing, everyone asks us questions. I've got two questions for the audience. One, who remembers in the beginning what you're supposed to do? Turn in your surveys, fill them out, turn them into the volunteers, the blue shirts. And the second question is, who remembers where to go, who's staying around for cocktails, where to go? Outside there, you got it. Okay, great, thanks very much.